What is going on, The Catch fam? My name is John Dawson, and in today's video we will be going over some of the Fallout and fantasy implications of the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft. If you do enjoy today's video, make sure to hit that like button down below, hit that subscribe button, join The Catch fam on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and make sure to drop a comment with your thoughts on the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft and how it affects our great fantasy football season. All right, first we need to talk about the trade with AJ Brown. I think this is probably the flashiest trade out of the two trades that we saw last night. Both were pretty much a major shock to most of the fantasy community. So AJ Brown getting traded from the Tennessee Titans to the Philadelphia Eagles. This impacts fantasy managers in a lot of different ways. So let's talk about the Eagles first and foremost, and let's talk about AJ Brown most importantly. For me personally at the moment, I don't feel like this necessarily upgrades AJ Brown or downgrades AJ Brown from a fantasy perspective. I really think he stays about the same. It's not like Ryan Tannehill was a super elevated quarterback. He did have a really phenomenal season 2 or 3 years ago, but overall he's really giving us pretty mediocre quarterback play at the position. So for me, moving on from Tannehill to Hurts, I don't think it necessarily makes a huge difference in terms of AJ Brown's fantasy outlet, right? So looking at this roster, we know that Devonta Smith, someone who I've been really high on at the receiver position, is also on this roster. For me, I think this helps Devonta Smith. I think now it's going to be a little bit easier for him to fill in as a wide receiver too, who will still, in my opinion, get a lot of targets while AJ Brown plays that wide receiver one position and really stretches the field. Now, in terms of AJ Brown as a fantasy prospect, you guys haven't heard me talk a lot about him because he really scares me. He's very inconsistent when he is on the field, and he doesn't necessarily get on the field 100% of the time. When we look at the past 2 seasons, he's missed a couple games each year since that really nice rookie campaign he had. At the end of the day, though, we know what he can do, similar to a Tyreek Hill, right, where he gets you those really high scoring games, and then he has some games where he's under double-digit fantasy points. You don't exactly know what to expect. So overall, I feel just about the same about AJ Brown as I did a week ago or a day ago post the NFL Draft. Looking at the other fantasy assets on the Eagles, like I said, I think this could actually help Devonta Smith. And in terms of Dallas Goedert, once again, I think it could help Dallas Goedert as well. But we know at the end of the day that the Eagles are going to be a run-first football team. Speaking of another run-first football team, we should probably talk about the Titans as well and how this trade impacts them. They are obviously going to be running the football first and foremost with Derrick Henry, but at the moment, Robert Woods steps up as your wide receiver one, right next to rookie Treylon Burks, who the Titans acquired with the trade that they traded AJ Brown away with. So I like Bobby Trees right now. I do think he can play as a wide receiver one, and if Burks can step up and be the rookie that the Titans are hoping he can be, then Bobby Trees is a phenomenal wide receiver too. So at the current ADP that you're getting Robert Woods, I actually really like his fantasy value. I think he's absolutely worth a shot, and he fits well into the Titans system. So I think this positively impacts Robert Woods overall. Okay, let's talk about Treylon Burks very quickly. A very highly regarded wide receiver prospect coming out of college. The exact expert comp that was on the screen for Treylon Burks was AJ Brown. I think he's a very similar receiver, similar to Deebo Samuel as well, a big body dynamic receiver. I think he's going to fit this offense quite well, and I do think that he'll garner a lot of targets in his rookie season. So in terms of the rookie receivers we saw drafted last night, I like where Treylon Burks is at. They obviously drafted him for a reason, and that reason is to replace AJ Brown, and I like him next to Bobby Trees on this offense. I think when we look at this depth chart at the receiver and tight end position, although Austin Hooper has shown some flashes throughout his career, it's going to be Treylon Burks and it's going to be Bobby Trees who garner all of those targets. Okay, moving on to the other big trade we saw during the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft. We've got Hollywood Brown moving to the Cardinals. So let's talk about the Cardinals and Hollywood Brown first and foremost. I like this trade for the Cardinals. I think this really positively impacts Kyler Murray at the quarterback position. He has a plethora of receivers to throw to. Now, when we look at last season, he had the same receiving core plus Christian Kirk. I think Hollywood Brown is a much better receiver than Christian Kirk. And don't get me wrong, I'm actually a big fan of Christian Kirk, and I thought he was a phenomenal fit within the Cardinals offense as well. But I do like Hollywood Brown overall just a little bit more. So I think this is good for Hollywood Brown, but I think it actually overall negatively impacts his fantasy outlet. If he was still with the Ravens, we know that he is the wide receiver 1 and that he would garner a ton of targets. All at the end of the day, Mark Andrews really, although he plays tight end, is the wide receiver 1 for the Ravens. But you know what I mean. As a pure wide receiver on the depth chart, Hollywood Brown would have been their number 1 guy. And him and Lamar Jackson had a phenomenal chemistry that really started to shine through last season. Really had his best statistical season of his career. Most targets, most receptions, most receiving yards. A little bit lower on the touchdowns, but still a really nice season, especially towards the beginning of the year. So I think this positively impacts Kyler Murray. I think that Hollywood Brown could still have a good year, but he moves to a much more crowded receiving room and a much more crowded offense. And if DeAndre Hopkins is fully healthy next season, well, Hopkins is hands down your wide receiver 1. But I think that Hollywood Brown easily garners the second most targets on this team. Still got Zach Ertz at the tight end position. You've got AJ Green, who, I mean, say what you want, but he had over 800 receiving yards last season. Rondell Moore, who I thought was going to have an opportunity to really step up this year, probably takes a step back, but is really a dynamic player who can do a lot of things at the receiver position. You guys know that I love James Conner, so I think that the Cardinals offense looks very high flying and is in a very good position after the trade for Hollywood Brown. Okay, but we do need to talk about the Ravens very quickly. I think that this obviously 1000% hurts Lamar Jackson. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Not only does it hurt Lamar Jackson's fantasy value, but gosh, the Ravens as an offense, I mean, there's plenty of time for them to draft receivers in the rest of the draft. There's plenty of time for them to make some more offseason moves, but at the moment, they are not a very attractive looking offense. You've got Mark Andrews. He is hands down the number 1 target on this team, and he is not even a wide receiver, although he is a phenomenal tight end, and easily, if anyone, this positively impacts Mark Andrews on the Ravens. Looking at the rest of this depth chart at the moment, Rashad Bateman is looking like he's going to be the wide receiver 1. He had a nice rookie season when healthy, but he absolutely will have to take a big step forward next year. So I don't think that anyone at this given moment is going to disagree that this trade absolutely 100% hurt the Ravens. All right, let's very quickly go through some of the receivers that got drafted last night. Drake London being first on the ballot, the first receiver taken in last night's draft by the Atlanta Falcons, and they had a dire need for the position. I think that this helps Kyle Pitts because now it's not going to be as easy for opposing defenses to X out Kyle Pitts, but overall, I'm a little wary of going out and taking a huge leap on Drake London. Don't get me wrong, he will garner a lot of targets theoretically, but those targets are coming from veteran Marcus Mariota. When we look at the rest of this offense, Patterson will probably garner some targets like he did last season. Zacchaeus had a decent season last year as well, given the position he was at on the depth chart, but overall, listen, I think London has a very good opportunity to garner a lot of targets. I'm just not 100% sure what he's going to be able to do with those. Obviously, if you play in Dynasty, this is a little bit more of a positive prospect. If you're playing in redraft, I don't quite know if I would personally be pulling the trigger on Drake London. All right, Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State going to the New York Football Jets, who had a very good draft in my opinion last night. When we look at this depth chart, it's not necessarily a crowded receiver room, but there are some very talented receivers on this roster. I love that the Jets went out and got another weapon for sophomore quarterback Zach Wilson. I think Elijah Moore is positively impacted by this. He can really do some of those dynamic things all over the field. I think he will probably be the wide receiver 1, but there is a possibility that he takes a step back to more of a wide receiver 2 type position, and Wilson is able to step up. So I do think that Wilson will garner a lot of targets in this offense. And also the nice thing for Garrett Wilson is that he doesn't have to take all the defensive pressure. You've got Elijah Moore here. You've got Corey Davis, who can absolutely stretch the field. And then Braxton Berrios, who I've been talking about all offseason long, has a very nice chemistry with Zach Wilson, and I think will be a very nice weapon within the slot as well. And you add CJ Uzama, who didn't have a phenomenal season last year, but did have a pretty good season overall for the Bengals. So I like the way that this offense looks. The running back room led by Michael Carter looks good as well. I think that this really positively impacts the Jets offense overall, and it gives Zach Wilson an opportunity to take a step forward as a sophomore. So at the moment, I do actually like Garrett Wilson in redraft formats and obviously dynasty formats as well. I do think Wilson will have an opportunity to really start to shine in that offense, and he is a player we need to keep an eye on. All right, Jameson Williams, I really like the Lions selection here, but this is a crowded receiver room. We've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had a phenomenal rookie season. You guys know that I've loved him all off season long. DJ Chark is added from the Jaguars, and then you've got Khalif Raymond as well as Quentin Cephas, who had some really nice moments last season at the position as well. But outside of that, TJ Hawkinson's going to garner a lot of targets at the tight end position, and then DeAndre Swift also gets a lot of targets out of the backfield. So I like this move overall for the Lions offense. I think it's a very good selection. I think that this offense is moving in the right direction, but overall from a fantasy value, I'm a little bit hesitant. There's a little bit more of a crowded receiving room and offense overall than it is for the Jets that we just talked about. So I'm a little worried for Williams, but I do think he will have an opportunity to garner a lot of targets in his rookie season. I just don't know exactly what this target share is going to look like overall. So I love the addition to the offense, but I'm just not exactly sure how much fantasy value we're going to see. It's going to take a little bit of time for this to really mature and for us to really know how Williams is going to be used in this offense, but he is 1000% a rookie receiver we need to be keeping an eye on. All right, let's talk about Chris Olave, who's my co-host Steve and I absolutely loved going into the 2022 NFL draft. We really saw him being drafted a little bit later on. We thought maybe to the Green Bay Packers, right? But at the end of the day, the Saints traded up. This was their guy coming out of Ohio State. He's a phenomenal prospect. Very speedy guy. Listen, if Michael Thomas is fully healthy, then I do think Olave is going to be a very good fantasy asset coming into the wide receiver 2 position. But Marquez Callaway and Tre'Quan Smith can make some plays if they are fully healthy. And of course, Kamara will garner some targets out of the backfield as well. Don't get me wrong, man. Jameis Winston ain't a perfect QB, but he can sling that football around. So I think that Olave is actually in a very good position for a rookie receiver. Once again, it'll take some time to really let this all mature and see how all of these rookie receivers are used in their respective offenses, but I think Olave is in a very good position at the moment. Okay, last on the list, we've got Jahan Dotson out of Penn State going to the Washington Commanders. Washington traded back, and I think they got a very good value when they selected Dotson. Personally, Dotson might be my favorite rookie receiver prospect at the moment. I actually really like him on the Washington football team. He's going to be able to come in, play at the wide receiver 2 position. I personally think that scary Terry McLaurin will remain with the Washington Commanders, and I think that absolutely helps Jahan Dotson kind of ease into an offense, ease into the NFL mindset and all of that. So I really like him, and don't get me wrong, Carson Wentz is not a perfect QB, but he can still sling the football around, and I do think that he'll be able to feed both Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson next season. You get a little bit of receiving work out of Gibson and especially McKissick out of the backfield. Curtis Samuel has not been fully healthy for this team. If he can come in healthy, then he might garner some targets as well as Brown at the receiver position. Outside of that, if Logan Thomas is fully healthy, he'll absolutely garner some targets. But at the same time, I think all that helps Dotson and won't be necessarily easy for opposing defenses to X him out. So I think he's in a very good position. He's one of my favorite receivers moving in to redraft formats in fantasy football in 2022. And that'll do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of last night's draft. It was absolutely crazy. We had an absolute blast hanging out with you guys last night during our draft party, and so many things happened that we did not expect to happen. So many things happened that impacted fantasy football for the 2022 fantasy season. Let me know what you think of the overall rookies who got selected last night from the receiver position. We have not seen any running backs selected. We had not seen any tight end selected. We didn't talk about Kenny Pickett in today's video. I will be putting out a video probably after the second or third round talking about QBs who were selected. I wanted to kind of save Kenny Pickett and maybe put him in another video with Malik Willis and kind of see where the rest of the QB prospects end up landing. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure to hit that like button down below and hit that subscribe button, baby. Join the Catch fam on the road to 1,000 subscribers. With that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on the Catch.